In this current climate, day and time, information needs to be given clearly. In this case, Clear Vision with 2020 is a podcast for the people, by the people, that does exactly that. Your host keeps an open eye and mind when dealing with any issue at hand. We empower our audience with knowledge. You matter, and here, I use my voice to support and represent the people. The people are the human family who loves truth. Logical thinking and conversation skills are required for communication. News, culture, music, and entertainment with a clear look from a different perspective. Clear Vision with 2020.
Peace, family. This is your brother 2020, and this is what I call Clear Vision commentary. Okay, so this is what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about critical race theory. Let me say that again. We're going to talk about critical race theory today. Okay. And while we're talking about this, what we're going to do is we're going to break it down. Because, see, there is a concerted effort on the part of the American government and the American school system to try to sweep the real life consequences of white supremacy under the rug. And now they don't want to talk about it in public schools because they have an idea that white children are going to be ashamed of the skin that they're in. Now, we both know that this has nothing to do with shaming anybody for who they are. You know, for a long time, the truth has been hidden from us about who we are, where we come from, and why we're here. Now that this truth is starting to come out, now that people are starting to talk about it, now that this history is being revealed all of a sudden in 2021, people got a problem with it. You know, a lot of white people who know how critical this is have been behind the scenes looking to dismantle white supremacy. And since white supremacy is on its deathbed and is being dismantled, now you have people, black, white, brown, yellow, and half original, who are trying to uphold the bastion of white supremacy. They're trying to uphold this false notion of history. They're what I like to call, they're baking up their own historical dish now, and they want to feed it to this new generation of people. They want to try and make everything that's already happened be looked at through a skewed lens now. You know, because the truth stands on its own. The truth doesn't need anything to support it. But lies and propaganda always have to be supported with more lies and more propaganda. So, there's this video by this lady named Dr. Carol Swain, okay? And she has a woman named Beth Feely talking about critical race theory. Now, they came up with a concept through the Woodson Center. Now, the Woodson Center is a staple in the community as far as civil rights go. See, our civil rights movement has been hijacked, and the hijacking started in the late 60s. Okay? The hijacking started in the late 60s. So these people who had this agenda, they took the civil rights movement and applied it to the rights of every person that was right here in America. Okay? They took our movement and our blueprint, and now they're using it to dismantle what we've been fighting for. Okay? Now, there are people who really want to sweep our history under the rug. But there's a black grassroots that's not about to let that happen. You're not sweeping it under the rug. You're not getting away with it. We're going to talk about it. And it's going to be talked about from a perspective that it's going to be understood by everybody. And the system is going to dismantle itself and it's going to be replaced with justice. So, I'm going to show y'all this video. Okay? I'm going to let you listen to a little bit of it. And we're going to kick off this conversation. So, this is Dr. Carol M. Swain. Okay? And this was on YouTube. It was released about 3 months ago. So they've been talking about this critical race theory thing for a while now. So I'm just going to open up this quick video. I'm going to let you listen to some of it, okay? You know, that way you'll have an idea where we about to go with this. Let me cue it a little bit.
Episode of Conversations with Dr. Carol Swain. This is the show where we talk about family, faith, politics, and unity, and anything else that's on my mind. And what's on my mind today is the education of America's school children. Whether they're in public, private, homeschools, colleges, and universities, I'm very concerned about the state of education in the United States of America. Anyone that's followed what's taken place knows that we have a crisis, and they will know that something sinister is taking place when it comes to education, when it comes to the curriculum, what our children are being exposed to, as well as the indoctrination when it comes to race. And when it comes to race, we find critical race theory, where young people are being told that if they're white, they are oppressors, they're responsible for all the evils of their ancestors. If they are people of color, they're being told that they're victims and that they have to be liberated. And what has happened is a situation that is not conducive to learning. What is taking place is more like indoctrination. Joining me today to talk about all this is a mother, a freelance writer, and also a special advisor to the 1776 Unites project, which is part of the Woodson Center. So help me to welcome Beth Feely to Conversations with Dr. Carol Swain. Beth, it's a pleasure to have you on.
Thanks, Carol. It's an honor to be invited.
And
Now I want you to pay real close attention to what she says when she starts this conversation, okay? This is Beth Feely. She works for the Woodson Center. Okay, Dr. Woodson is one of our brothers that's been at the forefront of the civil rights movement from the beginning. And one of the things that he did foster was he wanted to foster safe neighborhoods, and he wanted to talk to our people about how we treat each other. So, listen to this.
You got involved in education. As a mother, you're always involved in education, so you're educating all the time. But you shared with me once an experience with your child that really galvanized you. And so could you share that with our audience?
Sure. So about 4 years ago, actually, it was January 4 years ago, we noticed that my daughter's high school was putting on a program that was called Seminar Day. And it was a day of discussion about something they called racial civil rights. And I thought to myself, I'm not sure what that is. I know what civil rights are, but it just struck me as interesting. So I read a little bit about it, and it essentially, it was a day of kind of left-wing indoctrination on race. It was very biased, and the content that it was providing talked about microaggressions and safe spaces and had a Black Lives Matter activist, and it really struck me as very one-sided.
Okay. Now, she was talking about this day in her daughter's school. Like she said, talking about race and civil rights, or whatever term she used specifically. Let's go back and see what that was again. Hold on.
So that was what really the content that it was interesting. So I a day of just actually it was January 4 years ago. We noticed that my daughter's high school was putting on a program that was called Seminar Day, and it was a day of discussion about something they called racial civil rights.
Racial civil rights. Okay, so that should be the first red flag, because civil rights were about the rights of civilian people right here in this country. We have a civil right to live our lives. We have a civil right to be able to exist in this country. We weren't afforded that for a very, very long time. So when people felt like it was time for them to start standing up for this civil right of being able to be a person, recognized as a person and not property, this started what we call the civil rights movement today. So for the high school that she's going to have a seminar day, and they call it racial civil rights. So this is where the critical race theory comes into play. You know, we've been talking about how Black people have been treated in this country for a long time. This isn't the first conversation we had about this, okay? And just the fact that we're talking about it still in 2021 should say something. But now we're talking about it from a totally different perspective. Now the perspective is being talked to or talked about from the perspective of white people now, and them feeling like they're being bullied and maligned and shamed as oppressors and colonizers. Okay, so we all know that the current generation of people weren't slave masters, slave owners, so on and so forth. But the ancestors who were able to build a system that benefited those who came after them. So when we talk about this, this is the perspective that we're talking about it from. Okay? We're not talking about this just so we'll have some talking points to be able to put white people down. We're not doing that, because this is a system, and this system has affected generations and generations of people. So if you want to get upset about it to the point to where you go to your legislature and you go to these people that's in the office and you tell them, look, if you're going to keep on discriminating against people of color like you are, then we're going to withdraw our support from you. But instead of doing that, they want to talk about how it shouldn't be discussed at all, period. But before I get back into that, I did a quick search on YouTube of critical race theory, and a whole bunch of videos and came up about this. And I'm seeing a lot of Black and white people talking about we shouldn't be talking about this in school anymore. You know, they're having a meltdown, what I would like to say. Basically, they're having a meltdown, and they're starting to pull us into it now. Now, this is these new generation of people who feel like the stuff that we went through is no longer valid anymore. You know, yeah, we fought for civil rights, and now we got it, and now we're being treated good. And no, we're not being treated good still. We're not. We all know that. But now all of a sudden, all of these people are going on the air and, you know, they're voicing their opinion, talking about, you know, critical race theory isn't good. It's demeaning, you know, why are they so mad about it? I mean, it's history for one thing, but they don't run around here just calling any old white person a colonizer. You know, when we talk about stuff like this, we talk about it from a systemic standpoint, not a personal standpoint. I mean, it's 2021. The last slave ship that came over here in the late 1500s. Late 1600s. Well, no, I take that back. Late 1800s, according to history. Okay, so it's been a while since ships have been coming over here dropping people off. But the system that was built over here was built on that aspect of slavery. Was built on that aspect of the people that were being brought over here being property. So property doesn't have any rights, which is the reason why the whole civil rights movement came into effect anyway. Because all the way up into the 30s and 40s, we were looked at as property. Stay in your place. Don't look at me. If you eyeball me, you could go to jail. When I'm walking down the sidewalk, step off the sidewalk and let me walk by. You don't have any rights that a white man is bound to respect. All of this is law. All of this, these things are on the record in the United States, on the United States record. Laughing barrels, where you couldn't laugh in public. You had to put your head in a barrel and laugh because you couldn't be happy. See, this is the history that they don't want anybody to know about. So now, when this history is being exposed now, and these children are feeling a certain way about it, they go back home and they ask their parents, did we really do that to them? Did we really treat them like that? See, this is the context that all of this is coming from. Because now that these questions are being asked to the parents are looked at like, what are they teaching our children? Yeah, they're teaching your children the truth. You might not have got taught that when you were in school. You might have decided to, well, I don't really need history, but you need history now as a credit to graduate from high school. Black History Month is the shortest month of the year, 28 days. And those 28 days at the beginning of the year just makes every person you can think about just cringe. Especially if you white or half white or whatever the case may be, just makes you cringe because now for 28 days, you have to learn about, first of all, you have to be reminded that there were great black people that were back then. But it's called Black History Month. So see, this is a experience that's particular to us, not to everybody else, but to us. And since didn't nobody care about what was going on with us at all, period, Carter G. Woodson came up with Negro History Week in the early 20th century, just to remind us that we were actually people and that we actually had some accomplishments. So now that we done got to this point where nobody seems to like the fact that we have to talk about history now, and what we went through, our experience, all of a sudden, something's wrong with it. Now, I commented on this video. And when I commented on this video, I got a response right away. I mean, like literally right away. And when I said what I said, I was basically saying, look, all of this stuff y'all talking about, why are y'all feeling bad about this now? You talking up on it now like, it's a bad thing all of a sudden for us to be talking about history now, So I basically said, her experience ain't the same as ours. People come over here from other countries and they get the welcome mat laid out for them. They get all types of help and assistance. They get all types of, information, and they're always told, if you want to make some money, if you got a business, go to the black community. They don't never invite them to their community to open up their business. I mean, think about these things, so we gonna get back to the video. But I'm gonna come back to them comments here in a little bit, and we gonna get some more into it. But listen to what she got to say about this.
I thought to myself, I'm not sure what that is. I know what civil rights are, but it just struck me as interesting. So I read a little bit about it, and it essentially, it was a day of kind of left-wing indoctrination on race. It was very biased, and the content that it was providing talked about microaggressions and safe spaces and had a Black Lives Matter activist. And it really struck me as very one-sided. And so that was what really woke me up to what was going on in the school and forced me to pay closer attention. And so we brought it to the attention of the school, and the school was not interested in adding voices like yours, like Robert Woodson's, like Glenn Lowry, Shelby Steele, and other voices that I thought should be included for it to be balanced. So we ended up, it became a national news story, and it was something that really, galvanized me and the group that brought it to the attention of the school, but also to our community. And I think it woke a lot of people up as to some of the forces that have been influencing the curriculum choices in our school. And it definitely really changed the trajectory of my involvement and my activities outside of being a mom and a wife, and a community member. And so it was very eye-opening.
And Beth, how did it impact your daughter when she was being taught?
So, it's interesting at the time, I think she knew that it was one-sided and thought that it should really include, a whole variety of voices so that the kids could learn and choose for themselves. And so she was in favor, I think, of having some alternatives. And so she was very supportive. That was not necessarily true of a lot of the, people at the school, obviously. And even after this day, it did take place. We were able to get some alternatives, ways for kids to spend that day. And one of them was going down to the south side of Chicago and meeting with students from that area. And that's what she did. But she went back to school, and the next day was humiliated in front of her entire class for having made that choice by her teacher. So it was really, there's a lot of pressure on kids when they do even voice support for having a balanced, conversation about.
Okay, now she's talking about a balanced conversation. So see, for all of the time that we've been talking about this, I'm going to give y'all a little more context on this. Okay? So it's an article in the Final Call newspaper by Truth Minister Paul Scott. And I'm going to read a couple of excerpts from that actual article. So, real quick here, I'm going to go ahead on and I'm going to read off the Fair Use Act. So we'll be able to make sure, everything is taken care of, in this case. So, let me find it real quick here. Called the Fair Use Doctrine. I'm just going to read it here real quick, so we'll be able to go ahead on and take care of this. So, fair use disclaimer. Fair use is a doctrine in the United States copyright law that allows limited use of copyrighted material without requiring permission from rights holders. So basically, so under the law of fair use, I'm reading this article for the sole purpose of commentary, criticism, news reported research, teaching, or scholarship. And this is protected under the fair use doctrine of the United States. So that was just a brief way for me to talk about that real quick. So let me get to this article real quick. And I'm gonna read off a little bit of this, so we'll have a good base to start off with. So, in 1993, according to a book called Words That Wound, Matilda Lawrence, Delgo, and Crenshaw, critical race theory is grounded in the particulars of a social reality that is defined by our experience and the collective historical experience of our communities of origin. Okay, so now in the context of the 2021 discussion, it means developing curriculum from the perspective of the historically oppressed, with race being a common cause of their oppression. However, this discussion takes on a unique nuance when seen through the prism of the Black American experience. Perhaps the best way to put critical race theory into a Black perspective is found in Neely Fuller's book, The United Independent Compensatory Code System Concept Textbook, where he wrote, "Unless you understand white supremacy, everything else will confuse you." To get to the root, we must start with the uproar surrounding the establishment of the first Black Studies Department at San Francisco State University in 1968, involving such notable figures as Dr. Nathan Hare and George Murray, a former Minister of Defense for the Black Panther Party. This is a book y'all need to check out. It's called Black Power and Student Rebellion by James McEnvoy and Abraham Miller. This event set the tone for the discussions in which we are still engaged in over a half a century later. Now, this is what he wrote. This was a quote from a book called White Money, Black Power by Noe Rooks. Okay? It said, there is today no other discipline so closely aligned with social protest, student activism, and violence as Black Studies. So when Black Studies got created, it started talking about our plight here in the United States, with race being the common cause of our oppression. Okay? Now this is our side of the story. You know, they don't have a side of the story because there was no critical race theory that involved them specifically. There was no need for a white studies course. You know, so now as I get further down here, in 1987, Dr. Molefi Asante wrote The Afrocentric Idea, which serves as a premier exercise in apologetics, explaining the need for African-centered education in universities. Immediately following was the rise of conscious hip-hop by groups such as Public Enemy, Boogie Down Productions, and S-Clan, who preached the gospel of Afrocentricity into the proverbial streets, but it quickly spread to the mainstream America, courtesy of shows such as MTV Raps. Now this is where hip-hop comes in, because hip-hop was a defining moment. Hip-hop is a defining movement in America. And when we started putting messages to the music, this is when the conflict started. So, what scared white America during the early 90s was not that more Black people were beginning to learn about ancient African civilizations, but they were being compelled to challenge information that had been previously treated as historical sacred cows. So, they started combating all of the information that they were getting when they started finding out the truth. Just like I said earlier, the truth stands alone. It doesn't need anything to support it. But you have to prop up lies and propaganda all the time with more lies and propaganda. So during this time, our scholars, our babas, our teachers, such as Dr. Tony Martin and Dr. Leonard Jeffries, came under intense attack because they used a book that has been deemed anti-Semitic, and it's not. The Secret Relationship Between Blacks and Jews, Volume 1, came out in 1991, published by the Nation of Islam Historical Research Department. Okay? Once that book came out, here we come with the dissensions and the other stuff that was written. You know, now people want to try and, oh, it didn't have anything to do. So see, when we talk about critical race theory, what we're doing now is we done found out who the players were, and now we're talking about that. See, so when we talk about the players in the game, it started exposing the ancestors of the players. See, they don't want to be called out about how they were doing their work, how they were putting the system together. They don't want to be called out about that. So now that they're being called out about it, people like Miss Beth Feely here, you know, feels like they're being shamed because they're white now. They're being called colonizers and oppressors and, you know, so on and so forth. So they feel a certain way about it. But I'm going to go through a little bit more of this video so you'll kind of get an idea of where she's coming from. So let me cue some stuff real quick here.
And, you know, it's from the teachers, but a lot of times it's also from their fellow peers. And
I'm just going to go through different parts.
It's hard as a teenager to do that, I think, anyway. But then especially about topics like this.
So what did you learn? What was the most important thing that you learned from that experience?
I think, you know, it's interesting. I am actually a pretty shy person. I kind of, you know, keep to myself. I have my interests and friends and, you know, try to do my role as a citizen. But I think what it taught me is that you need to step outside your comfort zone. And it can be very intimidating and it can be even a little scary at times.
She said step outside her comfort zone, huh? Let me go past these commercials because now they got an actual commercial on here. I'm going to play this real quick.
Race and gender diversity training have placed demands for political correctness and mandatory race and gender diversity training have placed onerous burdens on businesses, churches, and nonprofits. Learn how to improve relations by educating your team with principle-based training that brings people together rather than driving wedges between them. Unity Training Solutions helps your organization build strong teams by respecting and harnessing individual talent, achieving your goals by providing viable alternatives to the divisive and counterproductive critical race and gender theories is our mission. Our expert facilitators and consultants bring greater harmony
to workplaces and educational board, don't you?
By respecting everyone's civil rights and equality under the law.
You see who was on the board. Dr. Carroll was on the board of this. So now I can understand why she's all aboard with this unity thing. You know, critical race theory drives wedges between people. I mean, it's been a wedge between us for over 400 years now. We had to continuously talk about this just to get people even interested in it. Now all of a sudden it's a big deal. You know, they've been doing everything they can to get the Civil Rights Act ever since when Obama got in the office. They started gutting the Civil Rights Act because they felt like after he got elected president, there was no longer no need There was no race issue anymore. They said after he got elected, we live in a post-racial society. He got elected in 2008. By 2012, Trayvon Martin got murdered. He said, if I had a son, my son would look like Trayvon. And they just totally, they lost their damn mind and started talking crazy about this man. When he said Skip Gates getting arrested on the porch of his house was stupid, and that the officer should have knew better when he seen the man's picture on the wall that it was his house, that became a teachable moment. So they sat down and had a beer and a conversation at the White House. And he had to apologize to this police officer for saying what he said. Now, these people with this critical race theory, quote unquote, all of the stuff that they have a problem with now, they're expecting us to not speak about what goes on with us anymore. And anytime we do speak about it and somebody feels bad, they expect us to apologize to them. See, all of this stuff set the tone for what we're going through right now. Everything that's been done all the way up until this point does set the tone for this argument. Now, it's like I said, when I looked up critical race theory on YouTube, got a whole bunch of videos about a whole bunch of people talking about how bad it is. They shouldn't be indoctrinated like that. I don't know why they feel the way they do. You know, you're making our children feel like, you know, they're evil. No, the children aren't evil. We talk about the system. See, you're not going to use that argument. You're not going to be able to use that argument to get off the subject. We're talking about a system of white supremacy that needs to be destroyed. This doesn't have anything to do with just white people. You know, there are black people, white people. Okay? What we call, let me take that back. I'm gonna flip that. We have white people's black people, and we have black people. Okay? White people's black people usually talk their talking points. Usually pick up their talking points and try to push that on everybody else. Then you got black people over here who know better. And we're not saying none of this stuff because of hate. It's a system that needs to be dismantled. The same system that discriminates and treats poor white people just as bad as it treats us. And they know it. They know it. But now this argument is about the children now. The children shouldn't hear this. Okay, so the next thing you're going to start scrubbing it from the history books. They already been doing that. They don't want to call slavery what it's supposed to be called. They don't want to make it what it actually is. They want to try and sugarcoat it and cover it up a little bit and turn it into something else. So now we got this so-called critical, so now we got this opposition to this critical race theory. All of a sudden, this critical race theory is just hurting everybody. Now, I don't buy it. It's just a way for the dominant culture to try and sweep our feeling and sentiment about things under the rug and want to focus on everybody else's feelings about why we say what we say, why we feel the way we feel. So they want to make us feel like we shouldn't feel that way anymore. We don't live in that time anymore. That's been over with. That's been over and done with. No, but the system is still here. So what? The people that put it in place are dead now. So what? I mean, they were getting mad about statues being taken down, you know what I'm saying, of known races that just happen to be figures of the country, important in people of notoriety, important historical figures. But what was the country? What was this country founded on? If it wasn't founded on slavery, this would be a totally different conversation. If we were able to come over here like everybody else, from wherever we were at the time, like the Italians, like the Greeks, like all of the immigrants that came over here. If we were able to immigrate with an E over here, like everybody else did, then we wouldn't even be having this conversation. If the Native Americans didn't get killed when the people got here to the land, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. If Native Americans weren't put into slavery, as well as black people being brought over here on boats and put into slavery, as well as any person of color being discriminated against or being put in a certain position, that goes for the yellow people, that goes for the Asians too. Yeah, you were discriminated against. Yeah, you were talked about. Yeah, you were treated just like we were treated when you came over here. But now all of a sudden you got this little bit of privilege. But if none of that stuff happened, we wouldn't even be having this conversation right now. Critical race theory would not even be a quote unquote doctrine / teaching if we would have been able to come over here like everybody else did. See, I can have this conversation forever, because they try to get away with talking about this stuff now. Like we're not paying any attention. We're paying attention and we coming right back with it. Because what you need to understand is this. This is not our conversation. This is their conversation. The people who don't want to be exposed now, the people who feel some type of way about their children coming home talking about, well, we were talking about this in school, and starting to ask these questions and starting to say, did you know that black people were being treated like, did you know that this was a system? Did you know that the reason why, my friends are being treated like they are, on the other side of town is because, see, they don't want to have that type of conversation in their homes. It's been going so good all of this time. Why do y'all want to talk about it now? Man, we shouldn't be having this conversation now. We live in a post-racial society. We shouldn't be talking about this right now. We're all trying to be unified and get along. We need to all love each other. But we still dying. Oh yeah, this is a conversation black people need to have too. I'm talking to you too. Because you've been killing yourself with impunity all of this time. We've been killing ourselves with impunity. We've been killing our future soldiers. We've been killing our future doctors. We've been killing our future lawyers, our future spokespeople. We've been doing that to each other as well as them doing it to us too. So yeah, this is a conversation that I'm gonna be having the same conversation with us too. Because we need to stop our madness as well. And when I say our, I'm including myself too. I'm not excluding myself. The last time I checked, I was a black person too. I done some stuff that I'm not particularly proud of either. Treated our people, my people, certain ways that I shouldn't have treated them. So yeah, I'm including myself in it. And just like Griff said, when is black lives going to matter to black people? When are we going to stop doing the stuff that we do to each other? Like he said, we trying to save our people. So now all of this critical race theory talk that's coming up now is making us look like, we just talking. We don't really mean what we say. We really not trying to stop what we doing, but we want to make them feel bad for the stuff that done already happened. See how they trying to frame the argument? But what are you going to say about it? Are you going to speak up? I'm speaking up. I don't know about anybody else, but I'm speaking up on it because I know better. You're not about to get away with that and think that it's going to be cool. But let me go through some. It was something else she said in this video, and then we gonna go ahead on and we gonna go ahead on and end this segment of Clear Vision commentary, and I'm gonna come back with it. I'm gonna come again with another episode of this, so we can talk about it some more. But let me figure. I'm gonna find out what she was talking about.
I want to go after a block of students because their parents stood up. I think it's much more difficult. And if you do it as a group, then you're pooling resources. And I think it's very important for parents to do their homework. And I know that you are a writer, and part of focus a lot on the impact on black kids of being told that you're a victim. And the thing too about it.
Now we about to talk about this so-called victimization, this victimhood. Oh, you're talking about black kids are the victims. Black people. Not black children, black people. Those children have parents, grandparents, great-grandparents that've been here for a very long time. And every generation, something had to change. But how did it change? It changed with us protesting. It changed with us having to put ourselves on the line in the streets. We had to speak up in order to change things, because if we didn't speak up, they was going to keep the system the same way. They didn't care about changing nothing. Why fix something that's not broken? To them, it wasn't broke, so why they got to fix it? So now we're going to get into this victimization stuff, okay?
Entrepreneurial way of addressing the problems associated with poverty. And I'm very much about personal agency, about how the Wood was that I had reached out. I was familiar with the work of Robert Woodson. And for those that aren't familiar, the Woodson Center has been around for 40 years. It's a nonprofit based in DC. And what it does is it goes and it looks for low-income grassroots programs and resources them. But all of these programs are run on what you could call the Woodson principles, which is actually the topic of his recent book. And they are very much about personal agency, about self-determination, about a very entrepreneurial way of addressing the problems associated with poverty. And I knew from my reading of Robert Woodson that I had a feeling that he would have a problem with what was going on at our school. So I reached.
Okay, so she thought he was going to have a problem with what was going on with the critical race theory. Like he didn't grow up in segregation. Like he didn't grow up in Jim Crow. Like he didn't know what none of this stuff was. You know, see, one of the things that they have a tendency to do sometimes is they have a tendency to take our good people who find creative ways to deal with problems that doesn't have anything to do with what they would consider being aggressive. You know, because being aggressive to, you know what I'm saying, some white supremacists, they look at that as hostility. You know, that was the reason why they killed Mike Brown, left him in the street and his body in the sun on the street for about 7, 8, 9 hours, you know, because he was a hostile black youth. You know, he probably deserved to die according to them. So since Dr. Woodson isn't coming with this aggression, he isn't coming with this anger and feeling like he's been slighted and everything, and he's trying to find a creative way to deal with the same problem that's been going on. Now everybody wants to lean on him and expect him to speak out against this. This has to do with his people. So why would you expect him to speak out on that in a negative way and support what you're talking about and not come over to us and talk to us about our side of it? Like he didn't experience the civil rights movement. Like he wasn't here when all of this stuff was going on. He was born the same year my mother was born, in 1937. My mother passed away a few years ago. But she could tell me stories about her grandparents and what her grandparents went through. So Dr. Woodson still being here, Mr. Woodson still being here, can talk about those same things. Now if he chooses not to, because he wants to foster a better relationship between the races of people, then I can understand that. But how can you have a proper relationship without truth being involved? I mean, I'm just saying. So hold on, let me go a little bit up here.
To him, and indeed, people also call it the race grievance industry. The whole issue of this, have a problem with what's going on at our school. So I reached out to him, and indeed, he did not agree with it at all. And we really connected on this whole issue of this message of victimization and victimhood. That really is what underlies. People also call it the race grievance industry. Yeah.
And the thing too about it is that we focus
race grievance industry. Let that soak in for a minute. Now, this is the doctor talking about the effects that it's supposed to have on black children. Listen to this.
A lot on the impact on black kids of being told that you're a victim and the society is stacked against you and that everything is racist. And I've spoken a lot about the crippling effect, but it also affects white kids too when it comes to guilt and shaming. Because many of them, they become social justice warriors. They feel ashamed that they were born with white skin. And I think it's just so inappropriate for us to shame anyone's child.
Okay, now she's saying that. We don't go around shaming people. Shame you for what? I mean, it's 2021. We have enough sense to know that this isn't 1821 anymore. This isn't 1721 anymore. Okay, we got enough sense to know that. Those people are gone. They've been gone. But they put systems into place. We're talking about the system of white supremacy. We're not talking about anything other than the system of white supremacy that needs to be dismantled. See, once you dismantle that history comes with hate and discrimination. You understand what I'm saying? It came with a one-sided hate and discrimination from one group of people towards another. So now that we've exposed that and we're starting to level the playing field a little bit here, now these conversations come up. Have you ever thought about this? Have you ever thought about the fact that a lot of white people don't like this either? Have you thought about the fact that they might have done their history and said, you know what? I'm not raising my children like that. But this needs to be talked about so they'll know how not to treat somebody in the future as they grow up, as the times change. So do you actually think that there are white people out here who don't feel like this needs to be talked about so that their children have a level playing field? So when their children get around people of color, they understand why they feel like they do. They understand why they look at things like they look at it. So these children grow up together, they go to Taco Bell, they might be sitting around having this conversation, and the white girl or the white guy over here in the corner overhears it, and they like, you know what? They making sense on that. I agree with them on that. And when I vote, this is how I'm going to vote. That's what they don't want. They don't want their children participating in dismantling white supremacy. So now the critical race theory thing is on the table and everybody want to talk about it now. Now it's an issue. They're going to be aiding in the fight to destroy white supremacy because they don't like it. They don't like the fact that people think that they're superior to somebody else. So they like, you know what, hold on. We ain't even rocking like that. What are y'all talking about? Can we get in y'all conversation? I mean, we just want to listen. Because when they listen, then guess what they do? They take it back home. And they put mom and dad on the spot. They put grandpa and grandma on the spot. They put aunt, auntie, aunt, uncle on the spot. Do you treat black people like this? Do you do that? Because if you do, I don't even want to have no part of that. And on top of that, I got black friends down the street, and I'd rather go and be with them and dismantle this whole system so we really can live together in peace, rather than sit up here and listen to you talk the mess that you talk. But if you take the truth out of the schools, if you take all of this stuff away, if you're not being honest with these children about everything that happened, then they don't have the information that they need to make a proper decision. So they're basically just going off of your rhetoric. Like we always say, don't take our word for it. Go research it for yourself. And if you find out that what was being said was the truth and you don't like it, then you're going to stand up against it. So see, that's what the real issue is. They don't want their children involved in dismantling the system because it's been working for them all of this time. We don't go around here making people feel bad for who they are because we know how that feels. We know how it feels for somebody to say those things about us. So why would we want to make somebody else feel bad? You know, when the actions start coming out like they do, and people start speaking out against it, that's what make the ones who want to keep the system going, that's what makes them upset. So now they try to find a way to, we got to find a way to skirt this. We can't keep letting this go on. We can't keep letting our children learn about this. Because if we let our children learn about this, then they're going to start coming home and having something to say to us about this. What can we do? You know, so the whole victimization thing is just another way of telling black people don't talk about it. You're no longer a victim. You know, you sound like a victim. Stop talking about that. And then want to regurgitate, then want to take the stuff that we already talk about and try to use it against us and make us feel bad. So they say we shame, and then in turn they shame. Now I'm gonna read one of the comments that this dude left on the video, because I commented on the video. I'm gonna read the comment he left, and this just goes to show exactly what I'm talking about here. Okay. Let me find it. There's a lot of comments on this particular. Okay, now this is one comment somebody left. They said, when you say black people whine and complain about racism and oppression, you're directly insinuating that it is not a legitimate grievance, which it is. The point that no black Americans are getting free degrees, even if you did say some, which you didn't, it would still be factually incorrect. Now this was somebody that was just commenting on the fact that well, she came over here and got 3 degrees and all of this stuff. Well, that don't mean anything. You know, we're not talking about that aspect of it. So I said, that's the problem. Your friend from Haiti is not from here specifically and didn't have our experience. This is a way for white people to not be held accountable for the actions of their ancestors. Where did white supremacy come from? Who created it? Had all of this pride in America, and all of a sudden white people are victims? Wow. So this was the comment. This was the response that I got. This was from Jack Halfman. Okay, whoever that is. And you're the one, this is what he said to me, and you're the one that's still suffering from a new upswing of racism. A racism that's causing you to hate people that were born generations later, that had nothing to do with it and would never take part in it today. See, that right there, now he gonna contradict everything he said with the rest of these statements, and then he gonna try to, take a little jab at me. But you want to browbeat them over it anyway. Also, your comment shows just how ignorant of history you are. Every Haitian is descended from slaves. Every one of them, in fact. The American slave trade was nothing compared to the Caribbean slave trade, and Haiti was at the center of it all. So see, obviously you're not educated enough on this. So it was called the transatlantic slave trade. Transatlantic. The ones who started it were commissioned by the Queen of England and the King as well. They went, or were trying to get to, the East and ended up landing in Hispaniola. They didn't have any slaves then. Just landed on the continent. Went back, told the Queen about what they found, then went back again. Now, the people that got taken from Haiti were brought over here, which is why you have Haitians over here now. The people that were brought from Africa to Hispaniola at the time, quote unquote Haiti, quote unquote the Caribbean islands, that was where the slave breaking took place. So on top of the fact that you already had people on these continents, they were bringing people from another continent to this one and breaking them on slave plantations, breaking them on farms, turning them into slaves, then bringing them over here. See, so, Jack here, you've been misinformed. See, you've been studying a form of history that it probably, when you started studying it, they started taking these facts out. So you think all of a sudden that they went over to Haiti and got slaves. No, they didn't. See, you've been misinformed. But I'm gonna finish this comment, and then we gonna close this out, and I'm gonna come back again with some more about this. But he said that your entire comment is based on a false idea on who this woman is or her ancestral legacy. Her ancestors were brought to Haiti in the bowels of a slave ship as well, and due to climate and disease probably suffered worse than your ancestors. Really? I mean, Haiti isn't that far from the United States. From what I know, the Caribbean islands, you can get there in a couple of days on a cruise ship. So you could probably, get from there to here in a couple of days. We're not talking about a 9-month voyage from the west coast of Africa all the way to the Caribbean. That take about 9 months. Okay, on the ship that's only being blown by sails, that's only being blown by the wind, and you have to take a certain route so you can go with the current in the ocean so you can get from one point to the other. You're not just going to sail across the sea. You got to get with the North Atlantic current. You got to get in the current so the current will take you where you need to go, as well as the wind blowing. So there wasn't no propellers on these ships back then. They didn't have any engines. Okay? So what Jack is talking about here is something that he's been fed. Now check this out. Didn't have our experience. What a crock. It isn't white people that's the problem in your life. It's the guy in the mirror. So now he's saying I'm the one with the problem, whose insides are rotting out of hatred and resentment. I don't hate anybody. I don't hate anybody. Especially white people. For what? What am I going to get out of hating white people? I don't hate people. I hate systems. I don't hate people. I hate attitudes and thought processes that people may have. You know, they can be changed. I don't have to like it, but I'm not going to sit up here and make you feel messed up because you feel that way. I know it came from somewhere. I know it was a teaching, something that was given to you. It's a little bit different. You know, I have a different kind of understanding of the situation. But he think that I'm just, you know. So what else he said? He said something else. What did he say? He said, you're letting the past define you instead of creating a legacy for your own, especially of your own to define you, something that your ancestors were never allowed to do. You're bringing shame to what they had to go through by pretending that you're somehow suffering with them. You don't think I'm not suffering with them because I wasn't back there with them. But because of the system that was created, generations of people after them had to suffer. But this was my response to him. I said, yeah, she suffered just like the ones taken from West Africa. So we have a similar experience. But if she was given this opportunity and others were not, what does that say about the people your ancestors taught? Talking about us. We got taught a certain way over here. We got taught a certain way to do things over here. And we were taught in a way that wasn't going to benefit us economically. It was just going to be symbol without substance. That's the difference. See, and this was the part that got him because he ain't said nothing else. I said, we had to go through the downs to get to where we are. And some still want to keep us in a state of ignorance to foster your false unity. I said it's based on lies and truth. You're mad because white people are looking at history and being critical of it. These children coming up now are saying, we're learning this? Okay, then they're going back to their parents and they're going to make them explain this to them. Explain to me why you did that to them. And what was the purpose of it? Well, we didn't do I know you didn't do it. But why did they do it? What was the purpose behind it? Why did they even do anything like that in the first place? See, this is what sparked the conversation. Because these children now are going to these different places and they're seeing these black girls and black boys and they're getting to know them. They're seeing that they're not the type of people that I thought they were. So now that I see that, all this other stuff now, I'm paying a little bit more attention to it now. I'm paying a little more attention to why the teacher talked to them different than what they talked to me. I'm paying a little bit more attention now to how the principal treats them versus how he treats me. Now I'm going out in society and I'm seeing how my boss at my work job treats this guy over here that I used to go to school with versus how he treats me. So they're starting to have a problem with seeing these two different ways of being treated. They're having a problem with seeing, okay, you treat him different than what you treat me. Why do you do that? You know, I came in 5 minutes late just like he did, but you just went off on him and you didn't say anything to me. They're starting to notice this. So they're questioning their people about this. Why do you treat him that way? Because, see, they wasn't raised with that spirit. They wasn't born with that. They wasn't born with that type of attitude. You might have tried to teach them to be like that, but it didn't take. You might have taught them, hey, you know, don't even go over there messing with them or whatever, blase scoop, because, you know, they not good people. But then all it takes for him is to run into one. And then, okay, hold on. He's not like that. Well, okay, well, he's not like that. Well, she's not like that. Okay, so who is this person you talking about? Who is this person that's so bad that don't like that I'm not supposed to be around? And then I go to their neighborhood and I see all of this stuff in their neighborhood, and I'm like, where did all of this come from? They didn't put it there. They don't have anything according to what you say. So see, the whole dynamic is starting to crumble around them. This system that they built, this mindset that they want their children to be a part of so they can keep this thing going, is starting to crumble now. So now they're getting upset about it, and they're going to talk about you shouldn't be teaching my child critical race theory. I don't want you teaching my child about this stuff and then having them come home talking to me about it, trying to make me feel bad. No, they're not making you feel bad. They just calling you to task. I mean, we would do the same thing with our parents. When was the first time you think that happened? I bet you the first time you knew that happens was with Santa Claus. And we were taught that this man comes down the chimney and put these gifts under our Christmas tree. Then we found out our moms went to work and got all of this stuff for us. So why did you tell me that this dude did it? What was the purpose of that? You see what I'm saying? So see, that was the first time you had to explain something to your child about this particular thing. So now they got to explain this too, which is going to be hard for them to do without the proper history, without the proper truth. So these children learning now, they can go and dig this stuff up, and then bam, they dig it up, and then they come back and they question you about it. Now you got a problem with it. So you got some questions you have to answer. So I'm going to come back to this video, our next segment. I'm going to come back to this video. And they're going to talk some more about this. And I'm going to talk about this 1776 thing that they got going on here, talking about. Let me go to it real quick. That way you'll be able to.
I don't think it's really teaching kids how to look at history. I think I don't think it's accurate. I don't think it's really teaching
citizens in the United States, in our society today.
Certainly. So I think what children need to learn is the truth. What happened. It's bad enough in terms of slavery and in terms of other terrible chapters in our history. I think what happens often is that those chapters get taught with distortion, without context, and it leaves kids with this very bad feeling about what America stands for, what it is, and it forgets to teach the good, or maybe the good is paid lip service. But for some reason, there seems to be this trend in looking at our history through a 21st century lens, and I find that troubling. I don't think it's accurate. I don't think it's really teaching kids how to look at history, so that they can actually learn and appreciate our background, but also the progress that's been made. And I think as it relates with 1776 Unites, we really felt like, yes, we should be teaching more about Black history, because kids are learning some basics, but they are definitely not learning about some very inspirational figures. And so we sought to expand that knowledge base. And that's really the gist of why we've chosen to do the 1776 curriculum as we have.
Right. And that.
Okay, the 1776 curriculum. We're going to talk about that this next segment. Okay. The year 1776 was the year of independence for the 13 colonies, when they told England, we're no longer dealing with you. We're no longer paying your taxes. We're no longer accepting anything from you. We'll do it ourselves. The Boston Tea Party kicked all of that off. 1776 started the American Revolution. Where were you, Black man and woman? Where were you And what was your status in this country in 1776? Think about that, and I'll come back with this next segment. This is your brother 2020. You have been tuned in to Clear Vision Commentary. Peace.
In this current climate, day and time, information needs to be given clearly. In this case, Clear Vision with 2020 is a podcast for the people, by the people, that does exactly that. Your host keeps an open eye and mind when dealing with any issue at hand. We empower our audience with knowledge. You matter, and here, I use my voice to support and represent the people. The people are the human family who loves truth. Logical thinking and conversation skills are required for communication. News, culture, music, and entertainment with a clear look from a different perspective. Clear Vision with 2020.